What's up everybody, we're back with another raid guide, and today we're taking a look at Lady Ashvane on Mythic difficulty. I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. For this encounter you want 3 tanks, 3 healers and 14 DPS, just a mix of range and melee. If possible you want one of your tanks to be a protection paladin, it will help out with soaking a lot, which I will cover soon. But let's start out with what's new on Mythic. First out is the empowered rippling wave. This is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, a much larger version of the regular rippling wave orbs. It's pretty much 3 orbs baked into one. It will always spawn from the furthest coral away from Ashvane. If it hits her, it will restore 30% of her shield instead of 10%, and it deals around 200k damage to everyone in the raid. You need to soak this orb 3 times in order to make it go away. Each soak will deal around 70k to everyone in the raid, and it will apply the waterlogged debuff. And once the shield is busted and we enter phase 2, or the burn phase, you will need to deal with regenerative coral, which is when a coral growth is shattered by arcing azurite, 2 zones will spawn. If you fail to soak one, a new coral will spawn from that zone. And you will have around 5 seconds after shattering a coral to soak that zone, and needless to say you really do not want to miss one of these soaks. It might seem like it's not a big deal with 1 extra orb per wave, but it adds up so fast. Anyways, the last change, which isn't really a new mechanic, is her health pool. And I guess her shield pool? And due to this, the DPS checks is pretty intense on this fight. You want to break the shield at certain points, and you want to get her below certain percentages during the burn phases. And if you fail to do so, the fight just escalates extremely fast. And all the mechanics you didn't care about on normal or heroic actually becomes very punishing on Mythic. With that said, how do we deal with all of this? First of all, I just want to explain the setup. We have 3 tanks due to the rippling waves. 1 tank deals with most of the wave orbs, and the other 2 tanks deals with Ashvane. And we 3 heal this, mainly because the DPS check is very tight and the raid-wide damage is fairly predictable, making it ideal for 3 healing. With that said, let's go over to the wave soaking, which is a major part of this fight. I'll go over 2 different strats for this, one for protection paladin soaking and one if you don't have access to a paladin. We played around a lot with different soak strats, more so than we probably should have, but here's what we gathered. And I'll go over this shield by shield phase. As a protection paladin, you can deal with up to 9-10 stacks of the waterlogged debuff without much of a hassle, and due to spell warding and bubble, you can clear a ton of orbs in quick succession, which we will use for the last waves. On the first shield you want the paladin to soak all orbs. On the second wave you let all the orbs go into Ashvane, as her shield should be depleted before you need to soak that wave. On the second shield you want the paladin to soak all the first and second wave orbs and to die after soaking the second wave, leaving the third wave to reach the boss. On the third and final shield you want 5 players to each take 1 stack of the orbs. Demon hunters are great for this, holy paladins, warlocks, people with good self-sustain anyways. When the second wave spawns, combat rest the paladin and let the paladin soak everything. Third wave, combat rest paladin again and soak as many as possible. For the second and third wave on the third shield, the paladin needs to bubble as soon as he gets rest and start soaking directly. If you want more detailed info about how I soaked, what CDs I used, what gear, hit me up on Facebook or become a Patreon and I'll help you out. Now, as I mentioned, if you don't have a prot paladin, soaking gets a bit more tricky, but it's totally doable. There's a number of ways to deal with the orbs. The one we felt worked the best is a rotation of DPS healers and the third tank. And I'll go over our layout of that. And on the first shield you want your soak tank to take the big orb and 2 other players each take 1 of the small orb. The second wave goes into the boss. Second shield, first wave, soak tank takes big orb and 1 of the other tank takes the 2 small orbs. Second wave, soak tank takes big orb, last tank without stacks takes the 2 small orbs and 2 additional players takes the last small ones. Again, classes with good self-sustain should be soaking first. And for the first wave on the last shield you want 5 players without stacks to soak all the orbs. Second wave, soak tank takes all the orbs and dies. And for the third wave you can either spread out across remaining players without a stack, and players with good self-sustain can take an extra stack, or you can have one of the Ashvane tanks soak most of the wave and die and you solo tank the last part. This strat will require a lot more raid healing than the Prot Paladin one, but it doesn't use any combat resist for tanks, which is a plus, but healers' mana will definitely be a minus. We got her down to 0.2% with this strat twice, but we killed her with the Protection Paladin Soak strat, but I know both works due to the 0.2% wipe. The only reason we swapped to the Protection Paladin Soak one is that we felt it was more consistent, due to the healing requirements being a lot lower. At the end of the day, you can play around a lot with the soaks, just try out different ways and find what works the best for your guild. Now, with that pesky soaking out of the way, due to all of the different DPS checks and timers in this fight, you will have to split up your DPS cooldowns a bit in order to match some of the DPS requirements. Sadly, I cannot tell you how many or which cooldowns to use and when. And this is entirely because it depends on your player's setup, gear and things like that, but I will of course go over all of the breakpoints. So, with that said, let's go over the fight. In phase 1 you want to tank Ashvane near the wall and try to stack all the coral patches from Barnacle Bash as much as possible. If a coral growth spawns near Ashvane, try to pull the boss away from it a little to get more time to soak the orbs. If an orb that should be soaked is about to hit Ashvane, you can also kite her away from it. And when Ashvane casts Briny Bubbles, have everyone stack on top of the tank that gets Briny Bubbles next to the boss as close to the wall as possible. This allows you to cleave him down without losing too much boss damage. Even if your class can immune this, you should aim to stack and immune on top of the other Brinies to make it less chaotic. Healers in range stay loosely spread and try to stay ahead of the boss a bit so as the boss moves, you don't have to. The goal for the first shield phase is to break the shield before you need to soak the second wave. If you break it way too early or before the second wave spawns like we did, then you've used way too many DPS cooldowns and should save some for the burn phase instead. It is perfectly fine if the shield breaks like 1 second before an orb reaches it. And when you do break the shield, all players should stack up next to the boss, let all the orbs hit the boss and heal through it. This will require a lot of healing cooldowns, especially cooldowns like Devo, Disc Barrier, Link, etc. Keep the boss at that location until all orbs have hit Ashvane and she used Barnacle Bash. Following this, move Ashvane to the middle of the room and try to drag her back to an old coral patch when she's about to cast her Barnacle Bash. Some guilds just leave it in the middle and stack them there, but we felt it was pretty manageable to avoid that and stack them in old corals. So, for the burn phase we marked 3 locations with 2 raid marks per location. Star green, left side of the room from the entrance, X and circle is the middle, and blue and purple on the right side. This is to make the arcing azurite a bit easier to deal with. When the first beams spawn, any targeted player will get a mark over their head and should move over to the side with their color on it. Due to the nature of these growths and how they spawn, this isn't 100% foolproof and will require you to actually still check around. Don't go out of your way to try and break every single coral on the very first beam. If it happens, great. If not, then whatever. You deal with the rest with the second beam. If we didn't break all of the coral with the first beam and the remaining corals could be broken by a single pair of players, we always had our tank and whoever got linked with him to deal with it to minimize raid movement. Now, each broken coral spawns 2 shards that needs to be soaked. Looks like the soak zones from the Rastakhan encounter. These spawn close to the broken corals, but they can spawn in the patches on the ground, so keep that in mind. And a side note, it is perfectly safe to run through a coral if you need to get somewhere. It takes like every 1.5 sec. As for the briny bubbles during this phase, we placed them between the boss and any corals that were up. And you want to try to get the boss below at least 70% during this burn. The lower you can get her, the better. Which is why you want to hold some cooldowns on pull. When the shield recharges, phase 1 starts again and it's pretty much rinse repeat at this point. Deal with the wave soaking, break the shield before the third wave needs to be soaked, and before the next set of corals spawn. You don't want to deal with more corals than you have to in phase 2. When the third wave spawns, you will have briny bubbles at the same time, which is a bit annoying. Have this set of brinies gather ahead of the boss in the direction you're kiting it to avoid them accidentally soaking waves as they're stunned. Kite the boss over there, break the brinies, heal through through the orbs hitting the boss, and keep in mind there will be more orbs hitting the boss this time around. And we use second pot during the later stages of this shield to get it down, but to also have the pots up during the second burn phase. With that said, for the second burn phase there really is nothing new. You want to get the boss below 35% to allow mage execute. But if you can get it below 30%, then the next phase 1 will be a lot easier, at least if you have classes that can utilize that execute. When you get to phase 1 again, you want to break the third shield before the fourth set of waves needs to be soaked. At this point, you really want everyone to use everything they have in order to stay alive when the orbs hit Ashvane. We popped Bloodlust around when the third wave spawned in order to get it down in time and to still have some of that lust up during the last burn phase. During this burn phase, ignore arcing Azerite, just find your beam partner, stand next to each other and nuke the boss. Don't break any corals, but do break briny bubbles, and again, nuke the boss. You need to defeat her before she recharges her shield again. If she does, I sincerely doubt she's going down. This fight is all about managing healing and DPS cooldowns, getting a good soak order and players actually moving with the beams during the burn phase. If you have any questions or if you run into any issues during your progression, feel free to hit me up. If you want more in-depth info about a certain part of the fight, like tanking, healing cooldowns, soaks, or whatever, just hit me up on Facebook or become a Patreon and you will get access to my Discord where you can get all my weak auras, healing CDs, notes, etc. And it's the fastest way to get a hold of me. And again, a huge shout out to all of my Patreons, I really appreciate the support. With that said, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like and ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching and I will see you next time.